I never imagined I would say these words out loud. Even now, when I try to speak them, my voice feels small, almost broken, as if my heart refuses to let the truth escape. But stories like mine, they don't stay silent forever. They live inside you, pressing against your chest, begging to be told so you can finally breathe again. Welcome to Stories by Amy. I share new life stories here every day, and I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now, let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you'll love it if you keep listening till the end. For a long time, I believed my life was simple. I believed love was straightforward, and family was a place of safety, a place where no one could ever hurt you in ways strangers could. I believed trust was something that naturally existed between people who shared blood and vows. I believed my world was safe. And maybe that is why the pain hit me so deeply. Because the people I trusted the most, the two people I loved in two very different but powerful ways, they were the ones who tore my heart apart. When I look back now, I can still remember the softness of those early mornings in our little home. The quiet sound of the kettle boiling, the gentle light coming through the curtains, his footsteps moving through the hallway, my sister's laugh whenever she visited. Everything felt ordinary, safe, familiar. I didn't know then that underneath all those peaceful moments, something was growing, something that would change my life in a way I never asked for. I remember one evening very clearly. I was sitting on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, sipping warm tea. The rain outside was soft, barely a whisper against the windows. It was the kind of rain that normally made me feel calm, the kind that makes you breathe slower, smile a little, maybe feel grateful for the warmth of home. He sat beside me, close enough that our arms touched. He said my name softly as if he didn't want to disturb the moment. He told me he loved me. He told me I was the person he wanted to grow old with, and I believed him, every single word. Sometimes I wonder if he meant it, or if he said those things just to ease his own guilt. Sometimes I wonder how people can speak so gently while holding such heavy secrets inside them. My sister, she was always the brighter one. The one who walked into a room and changed the energy without trying. Growing up, I admired her. She was older than me, smarter than me, and much more confident than I ever felt. When she smiled, it was like the room softened. When she hugged me, it felt like the world wasn't as harsh as it sometimes seemed. I loved her deeply. I trusted her without hesitation. Maybe that is what hurts the most. Because betrayal from a stranger is painful, but betrayal from someone you love, that changes something inside you. I didn't know what was happening behind the soft smiles and warm conversations. I didn't know that the two people I cared about the most were slowly building a world that didn't include me. Not completely, not honestly. I didn't see the small things at first, the quick glances between them, the quiet pauses, the messages that were just for work or just checking on her. Nothing seemed wrong. Nothing seemed strange enough to question. I was blind not because I was foolish, but because I believed love protected you. But love, it doesn't always protect you. Sometimes it blinds you before it breaks you. Everything in my life felt normal until the day the truth finally slipped through the cracks. And once the truth begins to show, even in the smallest ways, it becomes impossible to unsee. I still remember the moment it all started to unravel. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. There was no shouting, no sudden confrontation, no stormy night filled with anger. It was quiet, painfully quiet, like the world was trying to prepare me gently for something that would still hurt more than I could ever imagine. A phone left on the table, a message that wasn't meant for my eyes, a name, her name, my sister's name. At first, my breath caught in my throat. My heart felt confused, as if it didn't want to accept what my eyes saw. The words were not romantic, but they were far too familiar, far too intimate to ignore. A simple line, a small exchange, but everything about it was wrong. I wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding. I wanted to believe there was a reasonable explanation. But deep inside, something shifted. A quiet whisper, a strange ache, a feeling I didn't want but could no longer silence. That was the beginning. The moment the ground beneath me started to crack. This is the story of how I discovered the truth slowly, painfully, day by day. This is the story of the love I thought was real, the trust I believed was unbreakable, and the heartbreaking moment I realized that even the people closest to you can hide parts of themselves you were never meant to see. And this is the story of how I learned to stand again after my world fell apart. When I think about the years before everything changed, I remember a kind of gentle peace that lived in my home. It wasn't perfect, no life ever is, but it felt steady, predictable, warm in all the small, quiet ways that matter. Back then, I would wake up early each morning before the sun had fully risen and stand in the kitchen with my hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea. The air would be cool and he would still be asleep, his slow breaths drifting down the hallway like a reminder that I wasn't alone in the world. I used to cherish those mornings, the stillness, the soft sounds of the house, the feeling of belonging. Our life together didn't begin with fire or passion the way some love stories do. It began gently, like a slow breeze that you don't notice until it's already wrapped around you. We met through mutual friends, at a gathering I didn't even want to attend. I was quiet back then, more comfortable in my own space. But he noticed me. He spoke to me in a calm, thoughtful way, as if he wanted to understand who I was beyond the small talk. Over the months that followed, he showed up again and again, not with grand gestures, but with small moments that felt genuine. He remembered little things I said. He asked about my day and listened without rushing me. He made me feel like I mattered, like my presence added something to his world. And maybe that is why I fell for him, not because he was perfect, but because he made me feel safe. My family loved him too, especially my sister. She had always played a bigger role in my life than she probably realized. Being the older one, she naturally became the person I looked to for reassurance. Growing up, whenever I faced something difficult, a broken friendship, a disappointing grade, a moment of self-doubt, she was the one who held me through it. She didn't always have the right words, but she had a way of making me feel less alone. I admired her confidence. She walked through life with a kind of effortless grace, even when she was struggling. She wasn't perfect, of course, but to me she was everything I wanted to be. Strong, beautiful, assertive, unafraid. So when she and my husband got along, it made me happy at first. It felt natural, comfortable, like the two most important people in my life were forming their own quiet bond. Back then, I didn't see anything unusual in their interactions. My sister had always been warm with people, and he often found it easier to talk with her than with strangers. Sometimes the three of us would sit together in the living room, and they would exchange stories while I listened, smiling, feeling grateful that my life felt so connected. It's strange, isn't it? How something that feels precious in one moment can feel like a warning in another. But at the time, nothing felt strange. My home, my marriage, my family, they all carried this sense of delicate harmony. I wasn't looking for cracks. I wasn't expecting shadows. I believed we were all on the same side. And that belief made me blind to what was coming. There were days when my sister would visit unannounced. She always had a reason, dropping something off, asking for advice, needing a place to breathe for a while. She and I shared that kind of sisterhood where the door was always open. She didn't need permission to be part of my life. Sometimes she would stay for dinner, and he would cook with me. We would move around the kitchen in a quiet rhythm we had built over time, passing ingredients, stirring pots, tasting sauces. My sister would sit at the counter, swinging her legs, laughing as she teased us about how synchronized we looked. "You two move like a team," she once said, her voice light and playful. I remember looking at him and he smiled at me, a small smile that warmed me from the inside out. Because we are a team, he replied, and I believed him, with all my heart. The three of us would eat together at the table, the soft glow of the ceiling light falling over us like a blanket. We talked about work, about silly shows we watched, about future plans. It was peaceful, ordinary, the kind of evening you don't realize you're going to miss one day. After dinner, my sister sometimes stayed a little longer. She and he would chat in the living room while I washed the dishes. Their voices would drift toward me, hers filled with laughter, his calmer and steady. I never felt threatened by that. It felt natural. He was my husband, she was my sister. I trusted them both without questioning anything. If someone told me then that a storm was forming inside the walls of my own home, I would have laughed. I would have said, no, not here, not with them, not in my life. But storms don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they look like sunshine before the rain begins. I think the first tiny shift in my heart happened on an evening that seemed perfectly normal. My sister had stopped by after work, looking tired but cheerful. He had just returned home as well, and they both entered the house almost at the same time. They laughed as they walked in, and for a moment I felt a small, strange tug inside my chest, not suspicion, but something quieter. Something I brushed away immediately. We all sat together on the sofa. My sister leaned back, her head resting on the cushion, while he sat forward, elbows on his knees. Their conversation flowed easily. They shared stories about their day, stories I wasn't part of, stories I didn't know had happened. I didn't say anything. I told myself it was normal, that people connect in different ways. But I remember watching them, feeling a small ache in my heart that I couldn't explain. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't anger. It was something softer. Something like a whisper I wasn't ready to hear. As the night went on, they grew quieter. My sister looked at her phone a few times, smiling at something she didn't explain. He noticed, and for a moment they exchanged a glance, quick, almost invisible. But I saw it, just a flicker. A single spark of something I didn't have words for. I ignored it. I convinced myself it meant nothing. And maybe at that moment, it truly meant nothing. But little things build. They gather like raindrops on a window, slowly forming patterns you cannot ignore. At this stage of life, my marriage still felt stable. He and I shared gentle routines, morning chats, evening walks, simple meals together. We didn't argue often. When we did, it was usually over small things, forgotten chores, misplaced items, miscommunications that resolved quickly. We were not passionate fighters. We were quiet people who tried to avoid conflict. Looking back, maybe that quietness wasn't always a strength, because silence has a way of hiding things. And love, when not spoken enough, can leave empty spaces others can slip into. My sister, on the other hand, lived a busier life. She moved quickly, spoke quickly, and trusted people too easily. She had been in and out of relationships that never lasted. Sometimes she felt lonely. Sometimes she felt misunderstood. I often comforted her, telling her she deserved someone who would love her fully. I never imagined that one day she would seek comfort from the same person who comforted me. In those early days, before anything was obvious, she would call me late at night saying she wanted company. I would listen, offer advice, invite her over when she needed a break. She would sit in my living room with her head resting on her knees, telling me she felt lost. He would sometimes sit nearby, listening quietly, offering small words of encouragement. I didn't think anything of it. He was kind. She needed support. We were family. It all felt harmless. But the human heart is complicated. Sometimes kindness becomes connection. Sometimes connection becomes dependence. And sometimes dependence becomes something more, something no one intended at first. There was another moment, small, almost forgettable, that returns to me often now. I had cooked dinner and we were all sitting together again, the three of us. My sister complimented the meal, joking that she wished she could cook as well as I did. He laughed and said, "You can learn, I can teach you." At the time, it sounded like nothing. Just a friendly offer. But when I replay it in my mind now, I remember the way she smiled at him, a soft, appreciative smile that lasted just a little too long, and the way he looked down, almost shyly, as if trying not to hold her gaze. I don't blame myself for missing the signs. When you trust people, you don't look for shadows. You look for the goodness you believe is there. And I truly believed both of them were good. Flawed, yes, but good. Back then, nothing in my life suggested that a crack was forming beneath the surface. If anything, I thought things were improving. My marriage felt stable enough. My sister seemed happier. My home felt full. And I felt grateful. But sometimes the moments that feel full of life are the ones hiding the deepest emptiness. Sometimes the people who seem closest to you are the ones slowly drifting away in ways you can't see yet. And sometimes, the love you trust the most is the one already slipping through someone else's hands. I didn't know then what was coming. I didn't know how fragile my world really was. I didn't know that the two people I believed would never betray me were already standing on the edge of a secret they didn't want to face. But the truth doesn't stay hidden forever. Even the quietest secrets eventually find a way to rise. And mine was about to rise slowly, painfully like a storm gathering on a horizon I was too hopeful to look at. The days that followed those early moments of discomfort were quiet, almost too quiet. Life moved forward with its usual rhythm, but something inside me had begun to change. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a slow, steady shift, like a small crack forming in a windowpane, invisible from afar but growing underneath the surface. I didn't speak to anyone about it. Not even to myself. Sometimes admitting a worry makes it real, and I wasn't ready for anything real to break the peace of my life. I told myself I was imagining things, that closeness between family members was normal, that the heart sometimes creates fears out of nothing. But even so, something felt different. It started with little things, moments so small and fragile that they could easily be brushed away. And for a while, I did brush them away. For example, my husband began keeping his phone closer than before. It wasn't unusual for people to be protective of their devices, but he had never been that way with me. Before, he left it anywhere on the kitchen counter, on the sofa, on the bedside table. He never cared if I used it to check something, never reacted when notifications appeared. But suddenly, he kept it in his pocket. Always, even at home, even when it wasn't charging, even when he moved from one room to another. I told myself it didn't matter. People become more private. It doesn't always mean something is wrong. But privacy, when it appears out of nowhere, has a way of whispering things you don't want to hear. One evening, he was in the shower when his phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up, and for just a second before it dimmed, I saw a name. My sister's name. I felt my heart flutter in confusion, not fear, not yet, just that same small tug I had been feeling lately. I checked the time. It was almost 11 at night. A little late for casual messages, but not enough to start a storm inside my head. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't ask him about it. I didn't want to be the kind of wife who jumped to conclusions. But that night, when I lay beside him in the dark, I found myself staring at the ceiling longer than usual. My sister began visiting more often. At first, it made me happy. I loved having her around. She brought a kind of warmth into the house that I always cherished. But slowly, her visits began to feel different. The timing changed. The reasons changed. The energy changed. Sometimes she would show up without knocking, walking straight in with a bright smile. "Hey," she would say, dropping her bag on the sofa. I was in the neighborhood. But she lived 20 minutes away. She didn't just happen to be in my neighborhood that many times a week. I still welcomed her every time. I hugged her. I asked her how she was. I tried to pretend nothing felt unusual, but inside something silent was growing. One evening, I came home later than expected. I had taken a longer shift and I was tired, carrying two grocery bags in my hands. When I entered the apartment, I heard laughter, my sister's soft giggles, and his deeper voice echoing through the living room. I paused at the door for a moment, listening. There was nothing inappropriate in their tone, nothing sharp, nothing secretive, just laughter. But the familiarity in it stung me in a way I couldn't explain. When I stepped inside, they both turned to me quickly, too quickly. My sister stood up from the sofa. My husband cleared his throat and looked away. "You're home," he said, smiling, but his voice carried something stiff. My sister brushed her hair behind her ear and picked up her bag. "I was just leaving," she said lightly. She gave me a hug, but it felt short, rushed. Then she walked out the door without looking back. I stood there, holding my groceries, feeling something heavy settle in my chest. "Did everything go okay?" I asked my husband. "Yeah," he said quickly, almost too quickly. "She just came by to talk. She wasn't staying long." I nodded, pretending I believed him. But inside, my heart whispered a quiet truth. People rarely rush away unless they were doing something they shouldn't. The next few days were filled with small moments that deepened my confusion. I remember another evening, a small, quiet one where something felt painfully off. We were at the dinner table, just the two of us. He ate slowly, barely speaking, glancing at his phone every few minutes. His shoulders were tense, his eyes seemed far away. "Are you okay?" I asked gently. He looked up, startled. "Me, yeah, why? You seem distracted." He shrugged. "Just tired, long day." His answer seemed rehearsed, even though it was simple. After dinner, he left his plate on the table and went straight to the bedroom. I stayed behind, washing dishes alone. When I finished and walked toward the bedroom, I saw a soft glow under the door, the light from his phone's screen. He was lying on the bed, turned slightly away from the door, typing quietly. His fingers moved fast. His breathing was shallow. I didn't say anything. I simply stood there for a moment, watching him silently. "Who are you talking to?" I finally asked. He jumped slightly, as if he hadn't heard me enter. "Oh, no one, just a colleague." I nodded again, pretending it didn't hurt that he didn't look me in the eyes when he said that. He turned off the phone a moment later, placed it face down on the table, and turned away from me. The room felt unusually cold despite the warm air. That night I couldn't sleep. The next morning my sister sent me a message. "Are you home later? I might stop by." This time, something inside me hesitated. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "Yes, I'll be home." She arrived around the afternoon. She carried a small paper bag with pastries and handed it to me with a smile, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. She walked inside quietly, avoiding looking around too much, as if searching for someone. "He's not home," I said gently. Her shoulders stiffened for a brief second. "Oh, I wasn't asking." But something in her tone didn't feel natural. We sat in the living room. She talked, but I wasn't fully listening. Her hands fidgeted, she checked her phone often. Her eyes drifted toward the hallway every time she heard a sound. At one point she even asked, "What time does he usually get home?" It was such a simple question, an innocent question, but it sat in my stomach like a stone. "Why?" I asked softly. She blinked quickly, her face changing for a second. "No reason, just curious." But I knew my sister. I knew her expressions. I knew when she was hiding something, even if I didn't want to believe it. Over the next weeks, their communication grew more frequent. I didn't check his phone. I didn't spy. I didn't interrogate. Not because I didn't care, but because I was afraid. Afraid that I already knew the truth. Afraid that seeing proof would break me in a way I wasn't ready for. Instead, I watched. I observed. I listened to the small changes that began to shape the air around us. He became quieter. She became distant, but only with me. When the three of us were together, there was a subtle tension, a thin thread of nervous energy that made the room feel heavier. Once, during a family gathering, my husband and sister stood near the window talking softly. When I approached, they both stepped back at the same time, the same exact second. My sister laughed nervously. My husband rubbed the back of his neck. "Everything okay?" I asked. They nodded too quickly. That fragile little moment stayed with me for weeks. One afternoon, something happened that changed everything inside my heart. I had gone to the kitchen to grab a glass of water. His phone was on the table, screen up, silent, with a new message popping up. For the first time in a long time, he had forgotten to hide it. A preview appeared. One line, one sender, my sister. "I miss you." Time stopped. My breath froze in my chest. My fingers tightened around the glass until I felt it slip slightly. It was not the kind of message siblings send. It was not the kind of message someone sends to their brother-in-law. It was too tender, too intimate, too familiar. I felt a sudden warmth in my face, not from anger, from shock. Deep, quiet, painful shock. He walked into the kitchen a moment later. When he saw me standing near his phone, his eyes widened just slightly. "Everything okay?" he asked. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time I saw guilt. It lived in his eyes like a shadow, small, unspoken, but real. "Yes," I whispered, "everything is fine." But nothing was fine. Something had shifted permanently. Over the next few days, I watched his behavior change even more. He avoided my gaze. He left the room when I entered. He stepped outside to take calls. When I asked him if something was bothering him, he would shake his head and say, "No, just stress." But stress doesn't make someone flinch when you touch their arm. Stress doesn't make someone smile at their phone and hide it instantly. Stress doesn't make someone whisper in another room. My sister also behaved differently. She came less often. She appeared uncomfortable around me. She stopped reaching for hugs. Every time I tried to speak with her, she seemed in a hurry to leave. Once, when she visited briefly, her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, then immediately placed it face down, her cheeks flushed. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah, just busy." Her voice trembled, and in that trembling I felt a piece of truth slip out of her. The rising conflict didn't come from one big moment, it came from 1,000 small ones. The late-night messages, the sudden silences, the tense glances, the forced smiles, the unexpected visits, the shared laughter I wasn't part of, the feeling of being slowly pushed out of my own life. I tried to tell myself it was all harmless, that siblings and spouses could be close without crossing lines. That maybe my heart was just insecure, but deep down I knew something was growing, something dangerous, something painful. And the truth about secrets is that they never stay small. They grow in the dark, they take root, they spread in silence, until one day they become impossible to ignore. My moment of discovery, the moment everything shattered, was coming, and I was walking straight toward it. But even then, I still hoped I was wrong. I still hoped their closeness meant nothing more than comfort. I still hoped the whisper inside me was just fear, not truth. But I was wrong. And the truth was about to unfold in a way I could never have prepared my heart for. But the universe has a way of tightening the strings just when you think you can still keep everything from falling apart. A few days after that message, the "I miss you" that kept replaying in my head like an unwelcome echo, something else happened. Something quiet, but sharp enough to slice through whatever hope I was still holding on to. It was a Saturday morning, the kind where the sunlight feels gentle, where birds sound closer, where life seems peaceful on the surface. I was cleaning the bedroom, folding laundry, trying to keep my mind occupied. I picked up one of his shirts from the floor, one he hadn't worn in a while, and as I held it, I noticed a faint scent. Not perfume, not something obvious, just different. A scent that wasn't mine. A scent I recognized, the soft, floral fragrance my sister always wore. I froze, my fingers tightening into the fabric. For a moment, the world seemed too quiet. I lifted the shirt closer, inhaled deeply, hoping I was wrong. But no, it was there, faint but unmistakable. That scent didn't come from air or from distance. It came from closeness, physical closeness. My hands trembled slightly as I folded the shirt and placed it aside. My mind raced, trying to create explanations. Maybe she hugged him. Maybe they stood too close during one of her visits. Maybe it was transferred accidentally, but those explanations felt childish, like stories a child makes up to avoid believing in monsters under the bed. I stepped outside the room, needing space. The walls felt too tight, the air too thin. Later that afternoon, I went into the living room and found him sitting on the sofa, scrolling on his phone. He looked up briefly when I entered, then looked down again, as if my presence made him uncomfortable. "Do you want to go out somewhere today?" I asked gently. He shook his head without looking up. "Not really, I'm tired." "Okay," I whispered. I sat down on the opposite end of the sofa and watched him quietly. His thumbs moved across the screen. His eyes softened at something he read. A small smile appeared, a smile I didn't recognize anymore. A smile that didn't belong to me. I asked myself then, quietly, when was the last time he smiled like that at me? The answer hurt more than the question. Later that evening, I heard him on a call in the kitchen. His voice was low, soft, not urgent, not angry, just tender. I wasn't trying to overhear, I simply walked to get a glass of water. But when he heard my footsteps, he lowered his voice even further, turning his back to me. "I'll talk to you later," he whispered. And then the call ended. He turned around, forcing a casual expression onto his face. "Who was that?" I asked calmly. "Just work stuff," he said. "Work. The easiest lie. The most convenient lie. The lie people tell when they don't want to explain anything deeper." I nodded even though my heart knew better. He didn't ask how my day was. He didn't touch me. He didn't notice the heaviness in my eyes. And I felt myself slowly slipping into a silence. I never wanted to know the silence of someone who feels like a stranger in their own marriage. A few more days passed, each one stretching longer than the last. The energy in our home had changed completely. Even the walls seemed to feel different, colder, thinner, as if they couldn't hold our marriage together anymore. Then something happened that pushed me closer to the truth than I had ever been. A friend of mine invited me to a cafe one afternoon. She had something to discuss, but honestly, I was grateful for the distraction. When I arrived, she was already seated at a corner table, a warm smile on her face. But soon her smile faded slightly. "Are you okay?" she asked me gently. I hesitated. "Why do you ask?" "You just look a little tired," she said carefully. "And distant, like something's weighing on you." I forced a smile. "Everything's fine, just life." She didn't push, but her eyes said she didn't believe me. As we talked, my phone buzzed. I glanced at it, a message from my sister. "Where are you?" I blinked in surprise. I didn't tell her I was going anywhere. I typed quickly, "With a friend." "Why?" No response came for several minutes. When one finally did, it read, "Just asking." Asking what? Asking why? Asking if the house was empty. Something tightened in my stomach again. When I reached home later that day, I opened the door and felt a strange stillness in the air, the same kind of stillness you feel before a storm breaks. He wasn't home. The bedroom door was slightly open, and inside his phone lay on the bed, charging, face up, unlocked, something he hadn't allowed in months. For a long moment, I stood there, my heart pounding, my breath caught between fear and the need for truth. I wasn't someone who checked phones. I avoided it because it felt like crossing a line that once crossed changes relationships forever. But sometimes, reality gives you no choice. I stepped closer, slowly, as if approaching something dangerous. His screen lit up with a notification, a message from her. Did she leave yet? My heart hammered against my chest so hard I felt sick. My throat tightened. My legs weakened. I picked up the phone with shaking hands. There were messages. Recent ones. Frequent ones, dozens, some short, some long, some simple, some heartbreakingly intimate. I didn't need to scroll far before my vision blurred. Her messages: "I miss you. What time can I come? I don't like sneaking around." Did she say anything? When can we talk alone? His messages. Not now. She's here. I'll call you later. Please don't come today. I don't want her to find out. I care about you too, but we have to be careful. I felt my knees weaken. I sat on the edge of the bed, the phone still in my hands, but my thoughts spinning violently. Every fear I had was true. Every whisper inside me was real. Every moment I doubted myself was justified. The betrayal wasn't imagined. It was living inside my home. Two people I loved, two people I trusted, two people who should have protected my heart were tearing it apart together. I heard the front door unlock. His footsteps entered the house. He walked toward the room, humming softly, unaware that the truth he had been hiding was now open in my hands. When he entered the doorway and saw me holding his phone, the color drained from his face. Completely, he froze. I looked up at him with eyes I didn't even recognize, eyes full of pain, disbelief, and a heartbreak I had never known. My voice came out soft, barely above a whisper. How long? He didn't speak. He didn't blink, just silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. A silence that confirmed more than words ever could. My chest tightened so painfully I thought I might collapse. The air felt too thick. My hands trembled as I placed the phone beside me. I saw everything, I said quietly. You don't have to lie. He opened his mouth slightly, but nothing came out. Nothing honest, nothing comforting, nothing remorseful. Just fear of being caught, not fear of losing me. And in that moment, something inside me shattered so deeply I knew nothing would ever be the same again. I stood up, walked past him without touching him, without screaming, without begging. Because sometimes pain is too deep for noise. Sometimes heartbreak doesn't explode, it sinks. It sinks into your bones, into your breath, into your silence. And that silence becomes the beginning of the end. In the days that followed, I carried that silence inside me like a wound I couldn't show, a bruise I couldn't hide, a truth too painful to speak. I didn't confront my sister yet. I didn't ask questions I already knew the answers to. I didn't leave. I didn't break down. I just existed. Because sometimes, before a person finally breaks, they go numb. But numbness doesn't last forever. The storm was coming. And the truth, the full truth, was going to tear everything wide open. The hours after discovering the messages felt like drifting through a dream I couldn't wake up from. Not the kind of dream that startles you awake with fear, but the kind that traps you in quiet, suffocating disbelief. He tried to speak that night. He tried to stand near me. He tried to touch my shoulder. But every time he opened his mouth, the words died before they reached me, and I let them die. Because a lie is louder than silence, and I had heard enough lies in the messages he never expected me to read. I slept on the far edge of the bed that night, but slept was not the right word. My eyes remained open until dawn, watching the ceiling, watching the darkness shift into morning light. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't ask him why, how, when. I wasn't ready for the answers. When morning finally arrived, I stepped out of bed and walked to the kitchen. My hands shook slightly as I poured coffee, and the bitter smell felt heavier than usual. He walked in minutes later, hesitating in the doorway as if unsure whether he even belonged in the same room as me. Can we talk? Softly, my pulse tightened in my throat. Talk, I repeated, without turning to face him. About what? About how you've been lying to me, or about how my sister has been sneaking into my life through you? He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. It's not what you think. I finally looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the guilt he couldn't hide. It's exactly what I think, I said. You don't message someone I miss you unless something has already crossed a line. He swallowed hard. We didn't do anything physical. His voice trembled, and I felt a faint flicker of anger spark behind my numbness. You expect me to believe that, I whispered. He didn't reply, not with words. His silence was an answer in itself. I set the coffee cup down gently. You should leave, I said. His eyes widened slightly. Leave where? I don't care, just leave the house for now, I need space. He stepped forward instinctively, but took a step back when he saw the look on my face. He grabbed his keys slowly and walked toward the door, leaving without another word. The moment he left, the apartment felt too quiet, too large. I sank into a chair and let out a breath I had been holding since yesterday. And then the tears came. Slow at first, then faster, hotter, heavier, the kind that don't come from sadness or anger but from deep betrayal. The tears of someone who has been holding everything together for too long. I cried until my chest hurt, until my breathing felt uneven, until the reality of everything wrapped around me like a cold, unfamiliar blanket. When the tears finally slowed, I wiped my face, stood up, and walked to the window. Outside, life continued as if nothing had changed. Cars moved, people walked, children laughed somewhere in the distance. But inside, everything had changed. A betrayal inside a marriage is destructive. A betrayal between sisters is devastating. But when both happen at the same time, in the same story, it breaks something inside a person that doesn't easily heal. My sister didn't reach out that day, not a call, not a message. And her silence hurt almost as much as the messages I had read. But I needed to see her. I needed answers. I needed truth even if it shattered what was left of us. Around evening, I finally gathered the courage to call her. She picked up on the third ring. "Hey," she said, sounding slightly distracted. "Is everything we need to talk?" I cut in, my voice firmer than I expected. She went silent for a moment. "Okay, what's going on?" "Come to my house," I said. Now, another pause, a long one. "Is he there?" she asked quietly. The question hit me like a punch. "No," I whispered, "he's not." "Okay, I'll come." When she arrived, she walked in slowly, almost cautiously, like someone entering a room full of landmines. Her eyes scanned the space quickly, confirming he wasn't there. That hurt, the way she searched for him before looking at me. The way her face softened in relief when she didn't see him. I gestured for her to sit, but she didn't. She stood near the sofa, arms crossed, fingers tapping nervously on her skin. "What happened?" she asked. I didn't waste time. "I saw the messages," I said quietly. Her face paled instantly. Her lips parted but no words came out. Her eyes darted to the floor. "I saw everything," I continued. "All the conversations, all the late-night texts, all the things you two said behind my back." Her breathing quickened and her throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. I can explain," she whispered. "Explain what?" I asked, stepping closer. "Explain how long it's been happening. Explain why you didn't stop. Explain why you didn't think of me even once." She shook her head, tears quickly filling her eyes. "It wasn't supposed to happen." I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "But it did, and you let it." She covered her mouth with her hand. "I swear, we didn't mean anything by it at first. It just got complicated." "Complicated," I repeated. "You're my sister, he's my husband. There's no version of this story where complicated is an excuse." She pressed her palms to her face, crying harder now. I know, I was stupid. I was lonely, and he listened. He was kind to me." I felt my heart twist painfully. "So you decided to take something that wasn't yours," she sobbed. "I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did," I whispered. "Both of you did." She sank onto the sofa, her body shaking as if her guilt was finally too heavy to carry standing up. I stood in front of her, arms folded tightly over my chest. "When did it start?" I asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "A few months ago." My eyes closed briefly as the timeline punched through my chest. Months. They had been doing this for months while I tried to convince myself that nothing was wrong. "Did you ever plan to tell me?" I asked. "No," she whispered. "I was scared." I stepped back just slightly. "You weren't scared enough to stop." She sobbed harder, her voice cracking. "I stopped coming because I felt guilty. I tried to distance myself." "That wasn't distance," I snapped. "That was hiding." She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "I am so sorry." I felt tears burn at the back of my eyes again, but they didn't fall. Because now the pain was transforming into something else. Not anger, not hatred, just the quiet understanding that something inside our relationship was breaking beyond repair. I trusted you, I whispered. More than anyone, more than I trusted myself sometimes. And you threw that away for moments you weren't strong enough to say no to. She covered her eyes, her shoulders trembling. I took a deep breath. I need time, I said softly. Time to understand what this means. For me, for us, for my marriage. She nodded through her tears. I'll do anything you want, anything to fix this. I shook my head slowly. Some things can't be fixed. Some things can only be survived. Her sobs filled the room again. And for a moment, despite everything she did, I felt a small ache of sympathy because she too was breaking in her own way. But sympathy didn't erase betrayal. When she finally stood up to leave, she walked toward the door slowly, like someone walking away from a place they never wanted to lose. Before stepping out, she turned slightly, her voice trembling. I love you, she whispered. Please don't forget that. I didn't reply. I simply closed the door behind her. And the second the door clicked shut, I leaned my forehead against it and let out a silent, shaky breath. Later that night, when the apartment was quiet again, he returned home. He walked in slowly, as if entering a courtroom, not his own house. His eyes met mine, and what I saw in them wasn't love. It wasn't even guilt, it was fear. Fear of consequences, fear of truth, fear of losing the life he had taken for granted. Did you talk to her? He asked softly. Yes, I said. He nodded with a strange heaviness. What did she say? I looked at him with a calmness I didn't feel. She told me enough. He ran a hand through his hair. And you. And me what? What do you want to do now? He whispered. I inhaled deeply, feeling my throat tighten again. I don't know, I whispered, but I know things cannot stay the same. He stepped closer. I didn't mean for any of this. Stop, I said firmly. He froze. Don't say you didn't mean it. You had choices every day and you chose her. He opened his mouth, but I continued before he could speak. You chose her messages, her company, her secrets, her attention. You chose her over honesty, over respect. Over me, his face fell. And now, I said quietly, we have to face what you broke. The silence between us wasn't just silence anymore, it was distance. Distance created by betrayal. Distance he couldn't cross with words. I walked past him gently without anger or aggression. Because sometimes the deepest wounds don't need shouting to be heard. Sometimes silence is the loudest scream of all. That night I slept in the guest room, not because I was angry, but because I needed to remember what it felt like to breathe without him next to me. And that lonely, unfamiliar breath was the first step toward whatever future was coming next. The day after the chaos unfolded was strangely quiet, so quiet it felt like the air itself was exhausted. I woke up with blurry eyes, a pounding head, and the weight of everything that had happened sitting heavily on my chest. The argument, the accusations, the truth leaking out like poison. The silence afterward that felt even worse. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, replaying every sharp word and broken expression from last night. It felt like something irreversible had happened, something that would change the direction of all our lives. I wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or horrified. Maybe both. A soft knock came at my door. It was my mother. She didn't enter right away, just stood there, cracked door, gentle eyes peeking in until I nodded. She walked in quietly and sat beside me carefully, as if afraid I might shatter if she moved too fast. You didn't sleep, she said softly. I didn't bother denying it. After a pause, she added, no one in this house did. The guilt that had been fluttering in my chest finally collapsed into something heavy and solid. I wanted to ask her so many things: why she stayed with my father all these years, why she kept covering for him, and why she looked so tired even in the calm morning light. But I already knew the answers in pieces. Reality was a slow puzzle, and suddenly all the edges were fitting together. She took my hand. Last night, it wasn't just a fight, it was years of things we never addressed, years of pretending. She closed her eyes. And you saw more than I ever wanted you to see. I swallowed hard. What happens now? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked toward the window, where morning light was stretching across the carpet like a cautious visitor. Consequences, she finally whispered, for all of us. My father didn't leave the house, but he might as well have. He stayed locked in the study all morning, avoiding eye contact, avoiding footsteps, avoiding responsibility. I could hear him pacing sometimes, hear drawers opening and closing, hear the sound of him talking to himself in low, angry murmurs. He wasn't a man used to being confronted. He definitely was a man used to losing control. Every room in the house felt different, heavy, suffocating, tense. The walls felt like they were holding their breath. The air tasted like unfinished sentences. My mother tried to keep the day normal. She prepared tea. She folded laundry. She watered the plants. But her hands trembled so much that she spilled half the watering can onto the floor. "Leave it," I said quietly, putting a hand on hers. She nodded, grateful not for help, but for permission to stop pretending. By afternoon, the rest of my family began to gather in the house. Word travels fast in families like mine, especially when there's drama to dissect and judge. My aunt came first, then my father's cousin, then two more relatives, each pretending they were just checking in, but their eyes were sharp with curiosity. They wanted details. They wanted sides. They wanted a story. But this wasn't a story. It was our life, and it was falling apart. One aunt approached me with a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Beta, these things happen in families," she whispered. "But respect must be kept. Apologize to your father. End this issue before neighbors start talking." I almost laughed. Apologize for standing up, for speaking truth, for refusing to keep the family's image polished while its foundation rotted. I kept my mouth shut instead. Another relative cornered my mother. "You should have controlled her better," she hissed under her breath. "Children talk too much these days. One mistake and it spreads everywhere. What if this ruins your home? Think about your husband's reputation." I stepped forward before my mother could respond, my voice colder than I intended. "What about my mother's life, her peace, her dignity? Does that matter to anyone here?" The room turned stiff, silent, and judgmental. An older uncle shook his head slowly. "You have too much pride. A girl should know when to stay quiet." My mother grabbed my arm gently, not to stop me, but to protect me from saying something that would only push the family's claws deeper into us. "Enough," she whispered. But it wasn't enough. It was only the beginning. By evening, my father finally stepped out of the study. His face was rigid, jaw clenched, eyes cold. He didn't look at me, not even once. He spoke only to the people who had gathered around him like soldiers awaiting orders. "We're handling a personal matter," he said stiffly. "There's nothing for outsiders to interfere in." The way he said outsiders made my blood boil. He meant me. He meant his own daughter. My mother, standing quietly near the kitchen door, lowered her gaze as if bracing for a blow she wasn't sure would come. A relative asked my father, "Will you forgive her?" He inhaled sharply, glaring at the carpet instead of me. "She crossed a line." I clenched my fists. Another whispered, "Maybe she's grown too bold, too opinionated, too aware, too unwilling to accept the lies we'd been fed." My father continued, "If she wants to stay in this house, she needs to understand the rules." "Rules?" My breath caught in my throat. "What rules?" I challenged. Everyone snapped their attention toward me like I had broken some sacred code by speaking without being addressed. My father finally looked at me, eyes blazing. "You will not question me. You will not interfere in matters between me and your mother. And you will not spread any accusations outside this house." I took a step forward. "They're not accusations if they're true." The room collectively gasped. My father's face turned red. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "I saw everything," I said quietly. And so did she. My mother closed her eyes, not in fear, no, in exhaustion, in acceptance, in relief that just this once she didn't have to be the one to lie. My father pointed toward the stairs. Go to your room now. I'm not a child anymore. You're behaving like one. And you're behaving like. My mother grabbed my wrist so tightly that it startled me. Stop, she whispered urgently. Please. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I understood. She wasn't protecting him. She was protecting me. So I walked upstairs and closed my door quietly, even though everything inside me wanted to scream, fight, and shatter something just to match the break inside my chest. But I didn't, because consequences were no longer just possibilities, they were already happening. That night, long after the relatives had left and the silence of the house had thickened again, my mother came to my room. I was sitting on the floor with my knees pulled to my chest, trying not to cry. She sat beside me slowly. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then she said something I never expected to hear from her lips. I'm leaving. My head snapped up. What? I should have left years ago, she whispered. But I didn't. I stayed for you, because I didn't want you to grow up without a father. Now I see staying cost us even more. I stared at her in shock, trying to imagine a world where she wasn't here, in this house, holding everything together with quiet sacrifice. I'm not strong like you, she continued softly. But yesterday, when you stood up, when you spoke the truth, I realized something. You think you were the one who broke the illusion. But no, Beta, her voice trembled. The illusion broke itself long ago. I just kept patching it. I grabbed her hand tightly. You don't have to go alone, her eyes filled with tears. Your life shouldn't fall apart because of my decisions. It's not your fault. It is, she inhaled shakily. I stayed silent too long. I shook my head. You survived, that's not the same thing. She looked down at our intertwined hands. I'm leaving tomorrow, she whispered. A tear slid down my cheek. What will you do? I don't know, she admitted. I just know I can't stay. Everything inside me felt like a storm. Take me with you. She froze, shocked. You leave your studies, your future, for what? My pain? For us, I said firmly. Her tears finally spilled over. She pulled me into her arms, holding me as if afraid someone would rip me away. You deserve a life, Beta, she whispered into my hair. You deserve dreams. You deserve peace. Don't throw it away because of my broken marriage. I held her tighter. I'm not choosing your marriage, I'm choosing you. We stayed like that for a long time, two people who had been carrying invisible wounds for far too long. When she finally stood to leave, she kissed my forehead. Some truths break us before they save us, she said gently, but they still save us. And just before she closed the door, she added, Be ready in the morning, one way or another, everything changes tomorrow. The door clicked shut, and I felt it again, not fear, not anger, not guilt, but something new. Something that felt like the first breath after nearly drowning. Consequences didn't just destroy things. Sometimes they freed you. That night, after my mother left my room, I sat in the dark long after the house fell silent. The shadows on the walls, the faint hum of the ceiling fan, and the occasional distant bark of a dog, everything felt painfully loud. Every sound reminded me of how much was changing, how fast everything stable in my life was collapsing under its own weight. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I kept asking myself the same questions on loop. Were we doing the right thing? Was walking away the only option left? What would tomorrow look like? What kind of consequences were waiting for us once my father realized we were serious? Because knowing my father, he would not let us go quietly. I must have dozed off at some point, because the next thing I knew, a soft hand touched my shoulder. I woke up feeling groggy, confused, my eyes burning from unshed tears. My mother stood beside me, holding a small bag in her hand. We need to talk, she said softly. The sky outside was still pale, like the sun hadn't fully decided whether to rise today. She sat next to me on the edge of the bed, her face tired but strangely steady. Are we leaving? I asked. She shook her head gently. Not yet. Those two words held so many meanings. I sat up straighter. I didn't sleep, she confessed. I kept thinking maybe I should stay, maybe I should wait. Maybe things will calm down. But will they? I asked carefully. She hesitated. No, we both knew the truth. Calm wasn't peace, and silence wasn't safety. She reached into the small bag and pulled out documents, passports, ID cards, some money she must have saved in secret, and a piece of paper folded neatly. Last night, after you slept, she said slowly, your father came to the kitchen. He thought I was asleep. My stomach tightened. What did he say? She bit her lip, eyes lowering. Enough to remind me that nothing will ever really change. I felt heat rise in my chest. Did he threaten you? Her silence was enough. And me? I asked, her eyes lifted, full of worry and pain. He said that you're losing respect, that you're becoming uncontrollable. He blamed me. He said I failed as a mother. I felt anger flare inside me like a match. How dare he? She grabbed my hand. Beta, listen. Her voice cracked. We can't fight him with anger. He doesn't listen to anger. He only reacts to it. She squeezed my hand tighter. And reactions from men like him rarely lead to anything good. I swallowed hard. I wanted to rage, scream, break something, but she was right. Men like my father didn't crumble when confronted, they hardened. But I won't run, she said, surprising me. Not today, not like this. If I leave, I want to leave with dignity, not fear. I stared at her. She looked fragile, but her voice held a strength I had never heard before, a quiet, steady strength that grew from years of surviving. So what do we do? I asked. She looked toward the door as if measuring the weight of the house around us. We prepare, she whispered. We think, we make a plan, and we wait for the right moment. I nodded slowly. Leaving wasn't just about walking out the door. It was about breaking chains, emotional ones, psychological ones, financial ones. It required timing. And courage. By mid-morning, the house was awake. But something felt wrong. The air felt thick, tense, electric. I heard faint voices downstairs, muffled but sharp, like arguments trying to stay quiet but failing. I moved toward the staircase and froze halfway down. My father was sitting in the living room with two of his closest friends, men he trusted, men who always told him what he wanted to hear. When he saw me, his expression turned stiff, controlled. Come here, he said calmly, but there was steel underneath. I hesitated but stepped forward. My mother appeared behind me, her hand brushing my back as if reminding me she was there. One of the men, a tall, heavy-set uncle, spoke first. We heard there was an issue yesterday. An issue. I almost laughed. My father leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. We need to clear misunderstandings, he said, before they grow. I folded my arms. What misunderstanding? I saw. He cut me off sharply. You saw nothing. My mother took a step forward. She saw enough. He shot her a glare so sharp she instantly fell silent. He turned back to me. Your mother is emotional. She gets influenced easily. She always has. My jaw tightened. Stop blaming her. He ignored that. Of course he did. One of his friends shook his head slowly as if he were some wise elder. Young girls don't understand marriage, he said. They think every disagreement is a disaster. Wasn't a disagreement, I snapped. It was betrayal. The room fell dead silent. My father stood up slowly, towering over me. You are my daughter. You will not talk to me like that. And you are my father, I said, voice trembling but steady, and you should not talk to my mother the way you do. His jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle twitch. This house runs on respect, he said coldly. No, I whispered. It runs on fear. My mother inhaled sharply. The two men exchanged looks. My father stepped closer. You've changed, he said. This is not how I raised you. That's the problem, I whispered. You raised me to accept silence, to accept wrong. I won't. Something in his eyes flickered, anger, confusion, wounded pride. And then he delivered the consequence I had been dreading, the one he thought would break me. If you continue this behavior, he said, I will send you away, somewhere you'll learn discipline. My stomach dropped. My mother gasped. No, she's not a child. Yuka, he raised his hand, silencing her. I can and I will if she keeps disrespecting me. For the first time in my life, I felt fear, not the kind that freezes you, but the kind that clears your mind. It sharpened something inside me. I stepped closer to him, not back, not away, but forward. You can threaten me, I said, but I'm not afraid of you anymore. His face contorted with shock. You should be, he snapped. No, I said simply. I shouldn't, and I'm not. His friend stood up, sensing the tension. My mother took my hand tightly, her body shaking. Enough, she whispered urgently. Not like this, please. My father looked at her with a cold expression I hadn't seen before. You're the one who made her like this, he said harshly. And then, as if it hurt him to say it, he added, maybe you shouldn't have a say in how things run here anymore. Those words broke something in her. I saw it, I felt it, I heard it in her breath. And the consequences of that moment would change everything. After the confrontation, my father left the house with his friends. My mother stood still in the center of the living room, staring at the door long after it shut. She looked like someone who had been pushed one step too far, someone who had held everything inside for too long and now had nothing left to hold. I walked toward her slowly. Amy, but she didn't respond. She just whispered, as if talking to herself rather than to me. That wasn't a husband talking. Her voice cracked. That was a man who has forgotten he has a family. She sank onto the sofa, covering her face with both hands. I sat beside her and wrapped my arms around her. For the first time, she didn't try to be strong. She didn't try to reassure me. She just allowed herself to cry, not quietly, not carefully. Not the restrained tears she usually hid in the bathroom when no one was watching, but real, broken sobs that filled the room with the sound of years of pain she had swallowed down. I held her tightly, rocking her gently. It's okay, I'm here, I'm here. After a long time, when her breathing finally steadied, she whispered something I will never forget. I can't stay with a man who treats me like I'm the problem. I brushed a tear from her cheek. You're not the problem, she nodded weakly. I know that now. She looked toward the window, where sunlight was spilling into the room, touching her face with a soft glow. This house doesn't feel like home anymore, she said quietly. It feels like a cage. My chest tightened. Then let's leave. She looked at me, searching my face for hesitation, for fear, for doubt, but all she saw was certainty. Are you sure? She asked. Yes, I said, more than anything. She took a deep breath, a long, shaky one, and then she stood up. Then we should start packing. Those 6 words felt like freedom, but freedom always comes with consequences. We moved silently, carefully, methodically. Not out of fear, but out of knowing this had to be done right. We didn't pack everything. Just essentials, clothes, documents, money, a few sentimental items. My mother paused at every object she picked up, weighing whether it was worth carrying into a new life or whether it belonged to the old one. At one point, she found her wedding album. She opened it slowly, studying her younger self, smiling, glowing, hopeful. Her fingers ran over the pictures with a tenderness that wasn't love anymore, but mourning. Do you want to take it? I asked softly. She shook her head. No, that girl stayed in this house. I won't take her with me. She placed it back gently, closing the drawer for the last time. Meanwhile, I packed my own bag, jeans, t-shirts, a notebook, my laptop, a few books. It felt strange deciding what part of my life fit into a single bag. Strange but liberating. By evening, we had 2 bags ready, 2 bags to begin a new life, 2 bags to hold years of strength we had been hiding. My mother sat on the edge of the bed, staring at them. When he comes home, she whispered, everything will change. I know, I said. We'll face it. She nodded slowly. Together. For the first time in years, she looked like a woman, not a victim, not a wife trapped in a situation she didn't choose, but a woman reclaiming her story. Night fell slowly, stretching shadows across the walls. The house grew quiet again, but not the same suffocating quiet from before. This was different. This was the quiet of a storm gathering strength. My father returned late. We heard the car, the heavy footsteps, the door slamming. My mother stiffened immediately. I stood beside her, ready. He entered the living room, his eyes scanning the house, his expression unreadable. But the moment he saw the packed bags near the staircase, something inside him snapped. He stared at them, then at my mother, then at me. "What is this supposed to mean?" he asked, voice dangerously calm. My mother didn't look away this time. "It means," she said steadily, "that I am done." His face hardened. "And what about her?" he asked, pointing at me sharply. My mother took a step forward. "She's coming with me." The silence that followed felt like the house itself was holding its breath. My father's voice dropped into a chilling whisper. "You think you can walk out of my house?" My mother finally said the words she had held inside for years. "It was never your house, it was ours, but you forgot that." He stared at her, stunned. And I realized something in that moment. He never expected consequences. He expected obedience. But tonight, he would face the consequences he created. I don't know what I expected in that moment when my mother finally stood her ground and my father realized he no longer had control. Maybe I thought he would yell. Maybe I thought he would try to force us to stay. Maybe I thought the house would fill with the noise of anger. But instead, everything fell strangely quiet. He stared at the bags. Then he stared at us. His expression kept changing: anger, disbelief, fear, and then something I couldn't name. Maybe it was the realization that he had pushed us too far. Maybe it was the understanding that he had broken something he could no longer fix. My mother stood still, her shoulders straight, her hands trembling only slightly. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't crying. She simply looked tired of fighting, tired of hoping, tired of forgiving someone who refused to change. He finally spoke. "Where will you go?" His voice wasn't soft, but it wasn't harsh either. It was confused, lost even. My mother responded gently, "Somewhere peaceful." "And you think you'll find peace without me?" he asked. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them. "Peace doesn't depend on who we're with, it depends on who we become when we're free." I watched him process her words like he had never heard them before. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe no one had ever spoken to him with this kind of calm truth. "And her?" he asked, pointing at me again. "She is mine too." My mother stepped slightly in front of me. Not aggressively, just protectively. "She deserves freedom from fear," she said. "She deserves to grow without walking on eggshells. She deserves a voice that isn't silenced." My father's face tightened. "And what about respect?" he asked. "What about family?" My mother didn't flinch. "Respect is not obedience, and family is more than walls, it's how you treat the people inside them." Silence, deep, heavy silence. He looked at the floor, then at the staircase, then at the bags again. And for a moment, just a brief, fragile moment, I thought he would ask us to stay. Not with anger, not with force, but with vulnerability, but the words never came. Because to apologize, he would have had to admit he was wrong, and some people don't know how to face the truth inside themselves. He finally turned away and walked into his room, shutting the door behind him. It wasn't a slam. It wasn't violent. It was empty, as if he understood that something had ended, something he couldn't undo. We left early the next morning. The sky was still soft and gray, like it was giving us a gentle start instead of a harsh one. My mother held my hand as we walked out the door. She didn't look back. I did, though just once. The house looked the same, but it felt different. It no longer felt like a place that belonged to us. My father didn't come out to stop us. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't ask where we were going. He simply stayed behind a closed door, choosing silence over apology, and maybe that was his answer. We stepped into the car my uncle had sent for us. The engine started, and the tires rolled over the gravel road. I watched the house disappear through the window, becoming smaller and smaller until it was just a distant shape behind us. I thought I would feel grief, or panic, or regret, but all I felt was release. A breath I had been holding for years finally left my body. My mother placed her hand on mine. "Are you okay?" I nodded slowly. "Are you?" She hesitated before answering. "I think I will be." Her voice wasn't sure, but it wasn't broken either. It sounded like someone learning how to breathe again. We moved into a small apartment my uncle arranged for us. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't big, but it felt warm, safe, quiet in a comforting way. There was a single hallway, two small bedrooms, sunlight coming through the windows, and the faint sound of birds outside in the morning. My mother smiled when she saw the kitchen. "It's small," she said softly, "but it feels like a place where we can heal." And she was right. Healing didn't require luxury, it required peace. The first night there, we sat on the floor because we didn't have furniture yet. We ate simple food, rice and lentils, something warm but humble. The room felt empty, but in a good way, like there was space for new memories to grow. My mother looked at me and asked, "Do you think we will miss the old house?" I thought for a moment. "Maybe sometimes," I said, "but missing something doesn't mean wanting it back." She smiled gently. "You're right." And then she whispered, almost to herself, "I don't want it back." That was when I realized she had crossed the hardest part, already accepting that leaving was not failure but survival. Days passed. Then weeks. We fell into a new routine, one without fear, without shouting, without walking on eggshells. My mother began cooking again, humming softly under her breath like she used to when I was little. I started studying in peace without the sound of arguments filling the walls. In small ways, we were rebuilding ourselves. One evening, as I helped my mother fold laundry, she said quietly, "You know, leaving him wasn't just about him. It was about me too." I looked at her, waiting for her to continue. "For so long," she said, "I believed that staying was the strong thing to do, that patience was love, that sacrifice was the only way to hold a family together." She folded a shirt slowly, smoothing it with her hands. "But sometimes," she whispered, "walking away is the strongest thing." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "What about him?" I asked. "Do you think he'll ever change?" She smiled sadly. "I don't know. Change starts when a person looks at themselves honestly. And he has always looked everywhere else." We fell silent for a moment, then she added softly, "But I hope he does, for his own sake." I admired her for that, for holding compassion even when she had every reason not to. One evening, we sat on the small balcony outside the apartment. The sky was painted with soft orange and fading lavender, the way evening skies often are before they slip into night. My mother said something that stayed with me. "You know, Beta, people think the biggest betrayals come from cruelty, but sometimes they come from silence. From the things that should have been said but weren't, from love that was promised but never given." I leaned my head on her shoulder. "Do you regret anything?" I asked. She thought about it. "No," she said quietly, "because even pain teaches us something, even heartbreak brings us closer to who we're meant to be." The wind brushed gently against us. Birds chirped softly in the distance. The world felt calm. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "You gave me courage when I lost my own." I closed my eyes, holding onto her words. Maybe leaving wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning of the version of us we were always meant to become. Sometimes I think back to the house we left behind, to the woman my mother used to be, to the version of me who believed that silence was safer than truth. But I don't feel sadness anymore, just understanding, because life is not perfect. And people are not always who they promise to be. And trust is fragile, especially when given to the wrong hands. But healing is real too. And growth and hope. Our story didn't end in anger. It didn't end with shouting or dramatic scenes. It ended quietly with two women choosing peace over pain. And maybe that is the real lesson. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from what breaks you and walk toward what builds you. Sometimes Family isn't where you are born, it's what you create when you choose love, respect, and kindness. And sometimes, the softest endings are the ones that change you the most.